Welcome back to Autism Live. We have joining us via Skype right now a really inspirational mom. Rachel Jones is joining us, and boy, has she got a story to tell. So, Rachel, I've said that you are a very inspirational mom. I'm going to ask you to tell us a little bit about your story and how you identify yourself.
So, I actually, when I was younger, was diagnosed as having a learning disability, and I was in special education. Um, After I graduated from high school, I went on to college. I got an associate's degree in graphic design. Art's been a passion for me, but I didn't feel that I was getting what I needed from that. I'm more of a helping person, and I didn't feel I was helping anyone. So I started looking into other career opportunities. I like working with children, so I ended up getting a job as a one-to-one for a student with autism, and I had never worked with anyone with autism. I didn't know anything about autism. My student had gone through 2 teaching assistants in, it was only September still. He had self-injurious behavior, and it was really difficult for a lot of the staff to work with that, just because it's so hard to see someone hurting and not be able to do something about it. And I started working with a student, and I felt an instant connection, and I was fascinated by him. I was fascinated by the ways that we were able to communicate. I could use my art skills to communicate with him, and we just really connected. And I started working with CARD on being trained for ABA therapy. And what I learned and what I saw and the ways that I was able to help my student were so tremendous that I fell in love and kind of went very deep into learning everything I could learn about autism, trying to be the best therapist I could be. I worked with the supervisor, Denise, that works with my student now, or my child now, and I was very envious of her, of the skill level that she had, of the ways that she connected with students, and I felt really passionate about the way that I connected with the students, coming from a background where I just didn't ever feel like I knew where I belonged in school growing up. Connecting with other people was very difficult at times. There were times that I felt sort of victimized, but I didn't understand what caused people to see me as a victim or to bully me. Um, and seeing what these kids have to go through and what they've dealt with helped me to look at things in a different light and realize I have a lot of protective factors. I have a lot working for me. They deserve my best. So it prompted me to seek more services for myself, to get therapy, to look at what I need to do to get myself in a better situation so that I can provide the absolute best care for my students and not put demands on them or expectations that I can't fulfill myself. If I expect something of someone, I have to know that I can do that and that I pushed myself that hard. Otherwise, I will not ask someone to work as hard as I am, you know, I have to be able to work that hard too. So working with the students pushed me really hard, and also at the same time, I started picking up on the things that we were doing in ABA, a lot of the social things, pieces that I was missing. And as I was teaching my students, I was really taking that into consideration of how do I interact with people? How do I interact with my world and my environment? What skills am I teaching them that I really have to work on myself? And I think that was a huge part of me becoming more successful. Their success and my success was very tied together. The more successful my students were, the more respected I was by my peers and my colleagues, the more I started hearing people say things like, where did you get your master's degree? And I said, I don't have one. And where did you get your bachelor's degree? I don't have one. And my coworkers were saying, what are you doing? You have a gift, you have a skill. Among my family, when I would go home, that's all I talked about was autism, autism this, autism that. A lot of my friends and family would say, well, you kind of do that. And, you have that behavior too. I started looking at myself and looking at my family and realizing, my father has a lot of symptoms of autism. He scripts. When he's driving, he's reading signs. He can't filter information very easily in a crowded environment. It sort of became like a little bit of a joke. Oh, we have autism in our family. We're probably somewhere on that spectrum. A lot of people are. It wasn't until I saw it in my son, and I kind of use an analogy with autism that if autism was a person, it's a shadow of a person that I've seen at its worst and I've seen at its best. And you can't really love a person without seeing them at their worst and their best and taking it all together. And I've seen it both. I've seen it at its worst and at its best. And when I saw it in my son, and you become familiar with a person that you know that well. So that shadow of autism, I can see a little bit of it in a person. I can see a lot of it in a person. It depends on what I see. But I saw a little shadow of it in my son, and then I started questioning. Okay, well, am I really seeing this, or is it because this is what I do and this is what I look for? Am I seeing it where it doesn't exist? So I think that delayed him getting a diagnosis a little bit. When he was 3, it kind of got to the point where I realized he's hitting his milestones developmentally, but he's not using language in a really functional way. He is not adapting to his environment the way that a neurotypical child would. So I said, I think it's time, and we went and got him his diagnosis. And when we went to Strong to get the diagnosis, I brought my mother with me, and when they were asking questions about Gage, she kept answering them about me, and I had to keep saying, Mom, this is really about him. This is not about how I presented as a child. But the more she brought things up and the more I looked back on my childhood and saw the similarities, I thought, I think I'm autistic. And that is how I identify myself. When I'm working in a professional environment, I use person-first language, but I do identify myself as autistic, and I because I do take the good and the bad with that. It is part of who I am, and I think that's a really individual choice how people want to use that language. Some people don't want to be defined by it. I don't feel that I am defined by it, but I think that it is an integral part of who I am, and it gives me a lot of my gifts and strengths and protective factors, as well as setbacks and challenges. So it's been a really kind of a wild ride to go from an autism professional working with children and adults in vocational settings, in the classroom, in people's homes, doing parent advocacy and being on that professional end of things. And then to go from that to getting a diagnosis and being an autism mom, which to me was a very different experience than a typical parent who maybe doesn't have experience with autism. For me, it was not very stressful. I could understand where his level was and what his trajectory was going to be very similar to mine. I felt that he had obviously more protective factors than I did because he has a mom who has a lot of experience and knowledge and knows the resources. And then kind of coming full circle as a person with autism and being able to look back at my childhood and how I presented and the challenges that I had. It's interesting for us as a family to look at it. My father has terrible school aversion to the point where to him coming back and being reincarnated and coming back to school is like hell for him. He really, really wished that he could have gotten services when he was in school and been able to understand that he learns differently. That's all there was to it. And Gage at least will have that growing up, and it's really important to me that he's going to have that growing up. I was very fortunate. My mom was in special education, was a teaching assistant, and she reinforced with me really regularly, you learn differently, you're going to have to work a lot harder than everybody else. And no, it's not fair. It's just the way that it is.
It's a remarkable story. We should mention that you have experience as a New York State certified special education teacher, a teaching assistant, an ABA therapist, behavior support specialist, and you've been a volunteer and a parent advocate at IEP meetings. You are the winner of the 2014 Beverly F. Engel Excellence in Education Award. You have a bachelor's now in social work. So you have a string of accomplishments both behind you and in front of you, I know. But just so that we catch up now to this story, so your child has a formal diagnosis at this point.
Yes.
Did you, because I know a lot of adults, it's a very interesting thing when they start to realize, okay, this might, and boy, you're not the first parent that we've had on the show that didn't realize that perhaps they were on the spectrum until their child was being diagnosed and seeing the similarities. And some decide to go get the formal diagnosis and some don't. Did you actually go then and get evaluated?
I did. One of the main reasons that prompted me to go get an evaluation is I do work in the mental health setting. I frequently see clients coming through that have symptoms of autism, and they're treated separately, individually. Those symptoms, it's never really thought of as these people could have autism and might benefit from knowing that about themselves and being able to explore that. There's a lack of knowledge in the medical community about what autism looks like in individuals who function at a level where they didn't get diagnosed when they were younger. A really well-meaning colleague that I respect very highly at one point had said to me when they were making a referral that the patient, I had said the patient sounds like they might have autism, and she had said, no, I talked to him. And that kind of sat strange with me, and I thought for a moment, well, but you're talking to me right now too, and we work together on a daily basis. That doesn't mean that you would know that I have autism. And I did not have a diagnosis at that time, and it prompted me thinking, I need to do better. This is another area where I need to do better and as an advocate, and go and have the evaluation. I was sort of the mind that I would probably be more of that broader phenotype and not actually get a diagnosis. I know that when I was younger, if I had gone, I absolutely would have had a diagnosis, but I didn't know, with all my compensatory strategies, do I still present as a person with autism? And I had the evaluation, and I found it kind of interesting to look at my day-to-day activities and how many things I ignore or disregard people around me might pick up on. People that I interact with professionally would not notice, but people who live with me notice. I carry transitional objects when I'm nervous. I have a lot of little habits and quirks, and when you look at all of that together, you realize, oh, I guess I do qualify for a diagnosis, and I have found really good ways to cope. And knowing that about yourself really helps you put yourself in the perspective of how can I help other people? How can I make these coping mechanisms more functional and less noticeable, so that you can function in a professional environment? But also, I want to be able to say to people that respect me and know me, I have autism. So you might need to change the way that you think about autism. You might need to think more about the ways that you use language to describe people with autism, and make sure that you're using language in a way that helps to really describe their abilities and their challenges in a clear way. So we're not using words like high functioning. High functioning is relative to what you know about autism. And that's a big problem in the medical community, is that people will make referrals, oh, high functioning autism, but what does that mean really? What does high functioning mean? There are neurotypical people who are very low functioning. So it depends on what you're looking at. How well is someone functioning in the workplace? Are they getting along with their coworkers versus do they need a supportive environment? We need better language around that so that we can make sure that we're getting people the care that they need. There's a big shortage especially in New York, of mental health care opportunities for people with autism. There aren't a lot of mental health practitioners. It's kind of everything separate. Mental health and OPWDD is separate. Behaviorists are very separate from mental health professionals. There needs to be a little bit more of that coming together, and realizing that having a diagnosis is extremely helpful for the individual. It doesn't have to be something that's stigmatized, and it's something that should be explored in terms of language and how do we communicate, how do we look at the whole person, instead of treating individual mental health symptoms when this is not really necessarily a mental health diagnosis, but there are a lot of coping strategies that the people could benefit from. And whether it's in the education system, whether it's in mental health, I think that from my experience, there are a lot of interventions that work for people with autism that can also largely benefit neurotypical people, but we don't use them because there's no diagnosis. So what is it about a diagnosis that makes those services available, and how do we broaden that so that people are getting the same level of care?
Well, you are amazing, and you are such a breath of fresh air. I'm sure that you know that there's a great deal of controversy that swarms around the term autism mom. That there, you look, and for years, it's a term that I have used to describe myself, because everybody else was, and I don't know, I'm an intelligent person, but that's how I describe myself. And then through a bunch of different things, about a year ago, I started going, wait a second, I think because I'm meeting more and more moms that the description is more apt, right? That
Mhm.
because I even I do a one-woman show called the Autism Monologues in it, and in it there is somebody who says Autism Mom, it's the only group of people who have ever defined themselves, their name, by the diagnosis of something that their child has been diagnosed with. Like it really doesn't make entire sense. And there are moms who are coming to me now who have a diagnosis and have children, and they're like, I can't even describe myself with the words to describe myself. I'm a mom who has autism because this group of people is using this term inappropriately. But so you fit the description of what they say. You are a mom and you are, have a diagnosis on the spectrum and you have a child on the spectrum. How do you, when you refer to yourself, is it even a part of it? Do you describe yourself as an autism mom? What do you say?
I do describe myself as an autism mom because I think another large piece of autism is so incredibly different than any other diagnosis because of what it does to the people around them. It being an autism mom, I think the reason why that diagnosis ends up at the beginning of how a parent describes himself is because autism changes all of the people around the person with autism.
Amen to that.
I have been in classrooms, elementary classrooms, where a child with autism was integrated and people talked about differences, and that child taught all of the other children how to be compassionate, how to be empathetic toward their peers. There was extremely low levels of bullying. There was extremely low levels of taunting or teasing. There was a high level of understanding. Things that kids would normally single out as different, they did not see anymore. So all of those children were changed by that one individual with autism. For me, I struggled with anxiety and depression. I had suffered multiple traumas when I was younger. I had a brother who was murdered. I had, and that part of that delayed my diagnosis probably as well. When I was struggling, people saw that more as a response to trauma versus coping with having autism. So I was really in a place in life where I was struggling and felt different. And I can honestly say that the child that I met, the first child that I worked with who had autism, saved my life, changed my life, gave me purpose. There was a connection there that you just can't, there aren't words to really describe it. And that is true also of parents of children with autism. You will learn to be an entirely different mom. Your child is getting the diagnosis, but you're not going to be the mom that you thought you were going to be either. You don't have the child that you planned on having. There's a grieving process for a lot of people. Autism moms are stronger than they ever thought they would be. They are people who persevere, that feel connectedness to other autism moms. I understand that it is a bizarre thing to have a diagnosis in front of the word mom, but I think it is because the diagnosis becomes so much a part of your family, and the apple doesn't usually fall that far from the tree. So autism is a part of your family. It's a part of the person that you love, and I think moms do take that good with the bad. A lot of moms who have children who are really, really struggling with the diagnosis might say, I really hate autism. There are people that say that, and there are two very clear, distinct camps. From what I see on social media a lot, there are individuals who are consider themselves high functioning, don't want to be lumped in necessarily with the diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder. There was a lot of controversy when that was split up in the DSM, or rejoined in the DSM under autism spectrum disorder rather than Asperger's and autism. It's tricky because, like I said, it's that shadow of a person. There's the good and there's the bad that goes with that. It depends on what face of autism are you seeing. But I do define myself as an autism mom. I define myself as an autism mom before I got the diagnosis. It's an elite group of people that support each other. It is a badge of honor in a lot of ways. I think whenever someone struggles really, really hard with something and comes through it, it is a badge of honor. It's a badge of honor that you have this really, really special child with their challenges, but also their gifts and what they bring to the world. One of the first parents that I had worked with talked a lot with me about a loss of faith and a really difficult grieving process when their child was diagnosed. And I didn't want to overstep, but I had to let them know, you know, your child has a purpose in life. Your child is going to have struggles. Everybody does. Your child is going to be someone that you worry about. All moms worry about their children. There's going to be very specific things that are going to be different for you, but your child's changing you and your child changed me. And that's needed. These children are needed in the world. These adults are needed in the world. They're a part of society that changes society in much for the better. So I think it should really be an individual choice. How you identify, whether you use person first language, whether you identify as autistic or as an ASB or an autism mom, I think that's really personal and really individual. But it's tricky. When you get into the language, it does get really tricky and controversial for a lot of reasons. And I think a lot of people who are higher functioning on the spectrum have a deep sense of pride because their autism comes with more gifts than setbacks. So they see it as being different. I'm different and I'm unique and I can think of things in a different way than you can. It makes me a good problem solver. It makes me a good employee. I'm highly focused when I have a task in front of me or a problem I need to solve. There are a lot of gifts that come with autism. For some people, there are just a lot of setbacks that come with autism. There's a lot of pain. There's a lot of anguish. There's a lot of disappointment. I think that's why it's very difficult to nail down what's the political correct way to look at this. It's really individual. I think people need to reserve that right to cope with the way that makes them feel comfortable and identify in a way that makes them feel comfortable.
Rachel, you're amazing. I could talk to you all day. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but I hope that you're writing a book, and I hope that you're doing speaking engagements because you're a voice that we need to hear in this community.
Thank you.
So, and if people, is there a place where people could get a hold of you if they wanted you to come speak to their group?
Sure. My email is roch, R-O-C-H, autismconnect@gmail.com.
Okay. I want to thank you so much for being with us because we said that you were an inspirational mom, and man, did you deliver on that. So thank you so much. I got to say this because I love saying that the tree doesn't fall far from the apple. I don't have a diagnosis, but I swear that I've got a sensory processing thing, and it's been driving me crazy the whole time behind you. It says it's August. I need you to change the little thing on your thing there to say September. I just wanted to interrupt you the whole time and go, it needs to say September, Rachel. So please do that for me. Okay. You know what we always say here, puppies don't have kittens. There we are. But I thank you so much for being with us, and I hope to meet you sometime in person.
Thank you. Thank you
for
having me.
Get my way around there. All right. Thanks so much for being here with us. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Hey, thanks for watching Autism Live. To subscribe, click here. And if you'd like to check out some more of our videos, click here.